Mmm.
Hi, and welcome back to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. I am your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we're bringing in a bunch of stuff to stack up those to-be-read piles. So before we get started, let's go around and see who all is bringing in a lot of new releases. So, Russ, you're up first.
All right. Hey, gang. Good to see you. I'm Russ Colchamiro. I'm an author of science fiction, fantasy, mystery, crime, and some horror. I'm a member of Crazy 8 Press, and tonight I'll be talking about my ongoing series featuring hard-boiled private detective Angela Hardwick. There's actually 4 books in the series. The first one is Crackling Fire, 2 is Fractured Lives, 3 is Hot Ash, and the new one, which I'll be talking about tonight, which just dropped, this week, you guys will see it 2 weeks later, is Blunt Force Rising.
Layla?
Hi, I am Layla, and I write LGBTQ fiction and romance. That includes paranormal, bad boys, rocker boys. If you name it, I've probably got it. But today I will be talking to you about The Road to Rocktoberfest, which is a shared world series, and my book that will be coming out as part of Rocktoberfest, which is Damaged Saints. And this was my 3rd year doing Rocktoberfest, so I had to mix it up a little bit and actually go with a brand new band because I was playing with an older band twice with the previous books, so we went with something new this time.
Well, we've been hearing about this one coming, so it's about time. Gini.
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for dog books. I also write under a variety of other pen names and in other lengths and genres, and I'm here to talk about one of those pen names and one of those genres.
And Ro, you're up.
Hi, I'm R.L. Merrill, and I also write queer romance and horror and stuff. I'm going to be talking about You Can Do Magic, which is part of a shared world that is called the Carnival of Mysteries. So it's sort of it started off as a contemporary with a little bit of woo-woo and then ended up with a little bit of time. I don't know if you call it travel or displacement. I don't know. But there's a time issue as well.
We've heard a few things about that shared world and the troublemakers that are all about it. And somehow or another, miraculously enough, it is just lined up. So we've got the split screen going. So, Russ, let's talk a little bit about the world you've got going there. Since this is the 4th book in series, what kind of universe are we stepping into? What's kind of the setup? What's happening?
Sure. So the world itself, it's set it exists beyond just these 4 books, because this is actually a spin-off of a previous series, which was actually started off as a sci-fi comedy series, and which was Finders Keepers, Genius to Milo, and Astropalooza. And Hardwick started off as almost a blink and you miss it character in the 2nd book, but I love the idea. Always from forever loved private eyes and hard-boiled detectives and crime fiction. And as soon as she popped up, I knew I wanted to spend some time with her. I beefed her up in the 3rd book in the previous series. And then I said, you know what? I want to give her own. I want to see if this works. So I wrote a short story with her to see if it would work. I kind of found the voice to it, and it kind of went from there. So the universe that she's in, I call this is eternity. It's a realm. It's not a planet. It's not a galaxy. You can't get there unless it's sort of like this mystical place in the cosmos. And fundamentally, the realm's job, the reason it exists, is to physically build, maintain, and fix the infrastructure of the cosmos. That's just kind of what they do there. And then E-Town, which is sort of the core urban city in that realm, is kind of where Hardwick lives. And if you think about in our lives today, a really dense urban population, Tokyo, New York, San Francisco, whatever it is, but it has kind of really layers to it with a more of a sci-fi vibe to it, right? It also has androids and cyborgs and police drones and AI and dreamscapes and virtual reality kind of integrated within the city. So it feels like a lot where we are, but it also not as much. It's a little more advanced. I see Hardwick as, the way I describe her, is she's part Blade Runner, part Doctor Who, and part Sarah Connor. She's sort of a mix of, she's a private eye in the sense that she takes on the cases that you think a private eye would take. Arson, kidnapping, extortion, missing persons, corporate espionage. But she'll also take on cases that deal with time travel, with alien civilizations, with folds in time and space, with parallel universes. So she really kind of gets mixed up in this kind of thing. And beyond the kind of the cases that she takes, what was important to me, and I was just talking about this on another panel recently, is that in the sort of hard-boiled detective trope, often you really don't know a whole lot about them. They just kind of, they put on their fedora and they go out in the rain and they go out in the dark and the shadows and they just do what they do. But that's kind of, for the most part, all you know about them. Yeah, they sit at the bar and they have their scotch and all, and that's all good, which Hardwick does, by the way. But she also has a son named Owen. And in the first two books, and I'll just start by saying, in the series, each book is a standalone mystery. You can read them plot-wise. You can read them in any order. It does not matter. In each book, I reintroduce the world and the characters, the settings, so new readers can jump in and you know exactly where you are. There is some character development throughout, so your mileage may vary on if you want to start with book 1 or 3 or 4, that's up to you. But with Hardwick, in the first two books, character-wise, thematically, so she has this son and she's this hard-boiled PI who also does these intergalactic cases. She don't have a 9-to-5 gig. She could be gone an hour, a day, a week, a month, lifetimes, who knows? So she has to decide, can I be this really kick-ass hard-boiled detective and be a good mother to my son? If the answer is yes, well, what does that look like? And if the answer is no, what does that look like? So she really struggles with these two lives, these two core parts of her life in the first two books. In the second two books, kind of thematically, so Hardwick also has a protege, Eric Whistler. He shows up in the first book, and when we first meet her, she's, 33, 34 years old. He's about 10 years younger than her, and he's this eager beaver, and all he wants to do is just be on Team Hardwick. He will do anything, just put me in, coach. I'll work any hour. I'll do anything you want. And he's loyal, and he's hardworking, and he does research, and he'll take any crap that she gives him just to be a part of it. But after a while, he kind of doesn't feel like he's not really an intern anymore. He's starting to prove himself. And in the books 3 and 4, thematically, he's kind of decided for himself that he's kind of a big boy now. And he wants to be treated more like an equal. Is he? Probably not. I mean, even though he's gotten pretty good, she's much better and much more experienced, but it's that typical mentor-mentee relationship where there's a lot of friction, where, you want to be treated like you want a seat at the table. Maybe you haven't really earned it, but you think that you have because you don't know enough to realize that you kind of haven't. So there's a lot of friction between the two of them about how that works. And kind of thematically, Whistler has put Hardwick to the test and has essentially said, either you're going to treat me like a partner or I'm out of here. And they kind of have to negotiate that. And it does not go smoothly. And I'm not going to tell you how or if they work it out, but they go at it pretty good from a character standpoint while they're doing these wild kind of, cosmic shenanigans. The first book thematically and Fractured Lives is more kind of has a serial killer vibe. The second one is Crackle & Fire is the first one. Fractured Lives is the second one, which is has more of a cyberpunk vibe. and it really goes into Hardwick's origin story. The third book, Hot Ash, deals with it's more of a James Bond kind of a action thriller, and then the fourth one, Blunt Force Rising, which we'll be talking about, is more of it's a locked room murder mystery. And for me, it was a real challenge. Because I knew for a long time that I wanted to do this, because the first three books, there's a lot of room to run, a lot of space to go to kind of explore. And the fourth one, they're set on a Galaxy cruise ship, which is think of just like a cruise ship on the ocean, except that it's out in space. And what's happening is that we'll
come hit that in a couple of minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So anyway, that's just kind of
dive into that one in a minute.
Yeah. That's just sort of thematically kind of you wanted to set up for the world. That's kind of the setting, that's the space, and that's the place they're in. And they mix up throughout the four books with all sorts of nasty characters that you'd kind of think drug dealers, gangsters, crooked politicians, and so on and so forth, and other sort of, gnarly characters who all have their own ambitions, and whether they're criminal masterminds or not is a separate issue. But she doesn't really walk a straight and narrow path.
Cool. Layla?
Okay, well, The Road to Oktoberfest, it is kind of the brainchild of T.L. Travis, who writes the Social Center's Rocker Boys series. And in 2000, she had kind of approached about a dozen of us authors and was like, hey, wouldn't it be cool to do something like Burning Man? But every author writes their own book, and the only element that you have to have in there is that every band has to do a scene at this Rocktoberfest festival. And, some of us have kind of crossed over where, oh, hey, we know your band from last year. We're going to have a chapter or scene in our books where, two of us are writing it together, and we're catching up with old friends. So we did it in 2000, and then we did it again in 2002. And this is our third run of it. And we've got another 12 to 13 authors who have signed up and joined, and we're already getting feelers out and signing people up for next year. And the theme never changes. Rocktoberfest, it's out in the desert, but it's all about how you get your band there. And so this year has kind of been a strange thing for me. When I wrote the first book, Tattered Angel, it was, a band who'd lost their singer, and they were bringing a new singer / guitarist in, and he was integrating with the band, and it was going okay. We revisited that band along with the band Bleeding Dawn last Rocktoberfest to kind of see where they were in their second year coming back. And, it was kind of neat because they took them out to a spa in the desert, and they were just kind of like getting their minds right before they started playing again, because they'd had all kinds of upheaval the year before, and members leaving and people coming and going. And I really thought I was going to revisit that band this year with two of the other characters who'd kind of made some comments at the end of the last book that suggested, hey, these guys might hook up. I started writing that book and kind of like hit this wall where they just stopped talking to me. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I started a whole new book with a whole new band, wrote 97K, decided that did not work for Rocktoberfest. It will work for my other rocker stuff that I got going on, but it won't work for Oktoberfest. So my Road to Rocktoberfest book will be out on October 27th. I started the brand new version of it last week at 25K. And this one actually finally feels like what I was going for. And it is kind of fun because these are so unexpected characters. I scrapped everything from the previous two books. These are brand new characters, brand new situation, brand new band. They had a pyro accident after last year's Rocktoberfest. Their singer can no longer sing, so he's now their manager. Their drummer is all scarred up. And they've got this new singer who is coming in. And the problem is he's only ever played in cover bands and in bars. He's never been on a big stage. He's never performed original music, but he's got an amazing sound. He was referred to them by a friend, And he shows up there, and he fits right into their snarky, sarcastic style that they've got going on, because they love to give one another crap. There's just one little tiny problem. The band has 2 mascots, and these mascots are massive Saint Bernards. And my poor new character is terrified of dogs. Right before we came on the air, I was working on a scene. He's hiding currently in the linen closet. One of the dogs was chasing him, and that was the first door he got to. He has actually done the phone a friend and been given a lot of crap for it, because he is waiting for someone to come and get this dog who's sitting outside the door that just wants to play with him. Like, the dog just wants to be petted. It's a happy, Saint Bernard. I have already kind of resolved in my head how him and the dog will eventually become friends. But until then, he's in a linen cabinet cowering, and this has been such bits of hilarity. He actually jumped on his Harley and took off from in front of their place when he saw the dogs. Like, he never even got in to meet them on the first day. It was pull up, talk to a friend, the dog came out, and he tore off just down the road, just like done, not even gonna, try to audition. So it's been that kind of comedy ever since.
Jenny? So which one of your alter egos is bringing us this little tale?
This is The Dawning of the New West, by me writing it by A.E. Stanton. And as A.E. Stanton, I write novels set in the Old West and just weird Westerns and dystopian fiction, which, if you can see the cover, this sort of clearly is dystopian fiction set in an Old West setting. So the New West series this is basically a mosaic novel. It's collecting the first 3 installments in this world, where you're first seeing, it's very far in the future. And so you see everybody in utopia. And utopia is actually not utopian, okay? It's very, we're just playing games under the safety bubble. Basically, there's giant safety bubble, everything else. And there is one scientist still left who's like, no, y'all have not, we're actually endangered. Betelgeuse has gone supernova, and this is how far in the future this is. And that nova wave is coming. And all the science says, and all the computers say, oh, it's not going to be anything, maybe a flicker, right? And she's like, no, this is going to be a life-ending event. So you see her and a couple other characters in different spots, and how they're reacting to this, and how the world has changed. If you're not good enough to be inside these safe cities, you're living out in like the farmlands, or you're toiling, or you're in the prisons. And the prisons really matter, because the prisons are set out in the middle of nowhere as they are. And they're all controlled by computers. They aren't really run by people. You don't really have prison guards anymore. You've got computers. So, it's kind of a spoiler, but the sun does a massive solar flare, and it slags everything electronic. And what happens in the cities is that they're being controlled, and their drugs are being modulated, right? So anything that they were being given, it's in, whatever their correct dose is. And the 2 characters that you're seeing there, the ones that you're following, have pulled their shunts out. And so they aren't affected. But what happens is those drugs slam into everyone as everything slags. So you get, basically, they call them mutations, but they're my version of zombies. And it's horrific. And so everybody manages to, my few little heroes manage to escape. And then we jump forward a couple hundred years and see how the world has readjusted after this. And it's gone back to an Old West setting, because that was the most civilized we really got before electricity. And so you can still make your own bullets, you can still do all these things, but there is no electricity out there. But what's happened is the prisons have released, and there was nobody there to stop the worst of the worst of the worst from doing what they are. So there are a variety of prison compounds that have become their own towns, all of them run by whoever was the worst dude or worst group of dudes in the prison at the time and handed down through. Plus, we've got other places, the Kingdom of Texas. Texas refused some of the stuff, so Texas survived, right? We've got the Nebraska farmlands that managed to survive this because these were old ways people kicked out of the good places. So you're following characters who are the only people left in that sense. And the main action in when Josie comes home takes place in Horsetown, which is a very obviously a recreated prison, so to speak, and where all the women they're the doctors, they're the still runners, and they're the prostitutes, not because they want to be. So into this comes, will someone save them? Will they not? And then one of the characters is looking for the last city that he believes exists that wasn't damaged when at the darkening, when that happened, it's still there. So he's basically looking for the Garden of Eden or what the last thing of utopia. And that's when they're going on. But in order to get there, this ragtag group that's managing to survive is going to have to deal with zombies and white riders who are the road gangs, and they're what's worse, a mutant or a white rider. It's a toss up, right? Hardship and everything else to make it. And will they find the city? Will they not? Spoiler: not in book one, they won't. So. The main through line, though, in this series is that love, both familial and romantic, will save the day. And so that's the theme. So yes, it's post-apocalyptic and things are bad, but love for your family and love for your significant others will get you through.
Bro, how about your piece?
Well, we're back in the rock and roll scene a little bit. So I got invited to participate in the Carnival of Mysteries by Ari McKay. And she had created this world with her writing partner where it's this traveling carnival that can go between dimensions, can go between time periods. And so a person in one of our books can have been with the carnival. They can be there for up to a year, and that's it. And so I immediately, because I write music books, most of my books are somehow influenced by music. I have a series that is following the 2018 last cross-country Warp Tour. And so I have fictional bands mixed in with real bands, kind of having this experience. And there's been 2 books out in that series called Summer of Hush and Brains and Brawn. And in the first book and the second book, you meet this character named Ryan, who is actually the singer of a different band, but he's friends with the guys in Hush because they are back on the tour after their guitar player committed suicide 2 years prior. So there's a theme of kind of, grieving and carrying on that goes through the series of books. So I liked Ryan so much. I wanted to write about Ryan at some point, but his story, because he's in a different band, I was like, I don't know if he fits in this. Well, it just made sense that if you have a carnival that just shows up and then you have Warp Tour that goes to different sites, what if they were on the same site at the same time? And my character from the carnival, his name is Call. And Call is at his end of his year's tenure and he has to leave. And because he is the Calliope player, it makes perfect sense that he should be sent off into the world by the director of the carnival, Mr. Ame. And he's sent out with a duffel bag with some change of clothes, a bottomless billfold, which I'm kind of proud of inventing that. How would you like to have a bottomless billfold. And he ends up showing up at the Warp Tour, and they're like, "Oh, we're so glad you're here because Howie hurt his back and we need somebody to help him out on this stage." And so he just ends up, but what people from the Warp Tour don't know is that Call joined the carnival in 1931. So he's from a totally different time, and he meets Ryan, and Ryan immediately recognizes that he's unique, he's different, there's something different about him. He even describes him a little bit like a hologram, like he just seems out of place, out of time. There's comments about his shirt buttoned all the way up and tucked into his pants, and the cuff of his pants. And so it's a story about these two guys who have a lot of baggage. Call doesn't remember what happened before he joined the carnival, and we find out later why he doesn't remember. And Ryan was kind of put together based on some real life rock stars who got themselves into some trouble. Excess led to trouble, led to prison sentence, led to now you're back on the tour, but you have to be in a 12-step program. You have to have a sponsor. You have to talk to a therapist. You can't have sex with anybody that is employed by the band. Da, 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 da. So he has all these rules, and they have two new guys in the band that hate him, and he doesn't like them either. So his band is fighting. He's beginning to wonder, I'm trying to do everything right. Is it worth it to even be here? And then he meets this guy who's totally from a different place, and they make a connection. And there's a lot of other stuff that I think that explains the world that we're experiencing in this book.
So Layla, let's take a little bit deeper dive into the book that hopefully will be finished in time to be released. Because we've all been there. But let's dive a little bit deeper. Who are we actually hanging out with? Who are we going on the road with?
We are going on the road with a band called Damaged Saints, and it's kind of fitting. They have done Rocktoberfest. They're an established band. They'd been together for quite a while, and they played Rocktoberfest last year. They're not a group that I wrote about, but it was one of those things where I've kind of had these guys in my mind for a while, and kind of started putting pieces of their story together. After the Rocktoberfest show, they played a show where there was a pyro accident, and it was a massive, thing, and it almost wrecked their band. As it is, their singer was really hurt. Their drummer was really hurt. We're now almost a year later where this story picks up. And Robbie is kind of cynical about, are they even going to play, or do they need to give up their spot so there's time for another band to step in? And Jagger is their last ditch. He is like this guy that is from the town that I'm from, New Bedford, Massachusetts. I placed him and his buddy Johnny there as a tribute to the band that I used to belong to, and the friend of mine who passed away last year, who was in that band with me. And I kind of did a little tribute to him in Bleeding Dawn's book at the very end when I wrote a shred off and they gave away one of his guitars. But now I'm actually doing a little bit more, where Jagger's really a reflection of his personality. So there's a lot of personal in this book, and I'm kind of loving the fact that Jagger is just this snarky. He hides the fact that he is kind of nervous and a little bit out of his element with sarcasm and snark, and they're just to say that some of their conversations are not work friendly would be an understatement. It's just one of those things where they're getting to know one another right now, and they're seeing how they gel. And he's fitting in with Caden, their guitarist, quite well. Robbie's kind of on the fence about him. I think Mickey at this point is clueless. Like, I don't even get too many vibes off him. Like, he's a very quiet member of the group. And then there's Draven. And Draven still lives in that house. So I live here in Iowa now, and one of the things out here is that these old brick schoolhouses, they're huge, they're massive, and they'll sit empty for a long time. Nobody will use them. A few years ago, the neighboring town took one of these and turned it into an art studio with a performance gallery and all of that. They do open mic nights and plays and things. So I thought, how cool would it be if my band had pulled their resources together, bought one of these things, and turned it into their home and their studio? So Draven still lives there. So now you've got Jagger and meeting Draven, and he's more apprehensive about it. Draven, on the other hand, is just trying to help him like fit in. He's already decided that he's going to take over management of the band because they've lost their label dropped them because they don't expect them to come back, and they're kind of starting from scratch. So you've got the former singer trying to mentor the new singer, who's at first not really having that. Like, he's kind of, really like certain that Draven just wants him to fail, and it's going to take a little time for him to see that no, that's not the case. So we're really in the feeling out process where you can see who's really gelling and who's really going to take some time to come around. Though I think they're going to come around pretty quick, because for some reason this book is almost being written in reverse. So I've got scenes towards the end that have been really fun of them all. Ultimate Pickle Challenge. I have already written that scene. It is absolutely hilarious. If you have never seen a pickle dipped in caramel and rolled in M&Ms, they are going to try that along with some pickle ice cream with pickled jalapenos and a few other truly amazingly out there things with pickles that these guys have to eat.
Having done time in Iowa, having had to work in Iowa.
I'm still doing time here. Mine is going to be up in about 2 years.
So, Jenny, who are we going to be hanging out in your world?
Okay, well, because there's a distinct time jump in the first story, you're hanging out with 3 specific sets of characters. Again, the scientist and her boyfriend, basically. The young couple who Aaron is like, there's got to be more. This doesn't feel right, and he's the one he pulls his shunt out, and he pulls her shunt out too, because he just feels like something's wrong. This is not existence. This is not the way we should really be living, which is why the two of them get to escape. And then there is Nick Farrell, and Nick is the only person who's listened to the scientist. And he listened to her when she was a young girl, because she has been very focused on this, and she's very brilliant. So Melissa has been warning people about this for, her entire life, basically. Nick was her father's best friend, and she convinced him she was right, and he left. His wife wouldn't go with him. Her parents wouldn't go with him, and she was too young for him to take her with him as well, but he left. And we see that Nick, she doesn't know where Nick is. She knows he's probably headed for the farmland, which he did. And we see Nick working the land. And the reason why I'm kind of focused on Nick is that, and you'd only know this if you watch this, because I don't talk about this a lot. Nick and the girl that becomes his wife are absolutely the ancestors of the character Deacon, who is the one searching for the city. They know how to read, they know how to write. That's rarity. Okay. Most people do not know how to read. Only old ways people know how to read. The people in the computer world didn't. In the special cities, they don't need to read. The computer's doing everything for them. The people in the prisons don't get to read. Okay, but the old ways people, the people that are out there doing stuff, they get to read. So that's the only literate people you have left. Are the ones that are out there, and even a lot of them don't read. Okay, but Deacon's family holds it in high regard because of the background of where they're coming from. So he's actually a direct descendant of Nick Farrell's. You would not know this. Deacon doesn't know this. I know this because, I'm the guy. But Deacon doesn't know that. And so when we go forward, we're now in a very barbaric time. It's the Old West, only worse. In the Old West, you had the hope of progress, but the people that have survived the darkening will never go there again. They pretty much blame the electricity because, after a few years, you don't remember it was a solar flare that slagged everything, and most of you people are gone and everything else, right? So they blame the electric, right? The electricity is gone, and it created all the horrors that they're seeing. It created all these mutants. It created these, there's riches to be gained from going into the Badlands and the Wastelands, which they're now called, right? But you're risking mutants, you're risking other forms of death, you're risking a lot of stuff. So the prospectors that go in are absolute either thrill seekers, very wily, or just think they can kill everything in their path. So Deacon is very changeable, and he is one of my favorite heroes because you don't know you won't know who he is necessarily when he first shows up. And then Josie, when Josie comes home fame, is the heroine that's taking things forward, and she is actually, again, know this, she can trace her stuff back to Aaron and Glenda, who are the two young folks that make it out. They do survive. They do manage to have a family and move on and do all these other things. Josie doesn't know how to read till she meets Deacon. Because she's from that line. They were people that, the computers did everything. So there was no way in that sense to learn when the groups they joined with were not the same groups. So I have the darkening, the characters in the darkening are super important, not only to show you what happens, but because they are direct ancestors to my hero and heroine going forward. So, and there's a lot of other stuff that goes on. So it's like I said, it's a deep dive into what a post-apocalyptic world would look like if everything slagged, and ugly is how it looks. But within that, there's still a lot of stuff. They're very heavy on horses and dogs. They have a lot of dogs, lots and lots of dogs. Dogs train. Dogs are super good, and they have different kinds of dogs for doing different kinds of things. And this is more Deacon than just in general. Horses are back to being one of the most important commodities around. That's how you're traveling. No one's pumping gas. Right? Cars are just gone. It's like that they haven't existed in the first place for centuries, right? You don't need them in these special cities, right? And the people outside, where you get, if you're blocked from the refineries because glass walls have gone up, you can't be getting gas. So they've gone back to a horse culture in the old ways people, even before the darkening. So it was just fun because my main background, when I first started writing, I was actually doing novels set in the Old West. And I did so much research that I'm actually now an Old West expert because I've read like every book, including the ones that contradict each other, which is always fun. Sometimes they're contradicting each other in the same book. But it's a very interesting time in history, and it was very brief. And I wanted to say, what would it be like if it was no longer brief? If this is the height you're hitting, you're not getting any farther than this because culturally, worldwide, you're terrified to do it. So what happens if you're just living in the Old West? Well, it was hard on women and horses, and it's even harder now.
Ro?
Ooh, okay. So you want to know who we're hanging out with? I introduced them a little bit.
This time?
We're hanging out with Ryan and Call. Ryan is known for he plays up his persona as being kind of the slutty front man. He's also an artist, and his drawing sessions are famous for the things that happen when he's got his pencils out. But in reality, that's not him anymore. That was before he went to prison and had this life-changing experience. After he got out of prison, he wrote an album's worth of materials with the guitar player from Hush that actually passed away. And so he still wants to make this music. So he has this aspiration to have a better life, and he's kind of stuck in these like dysfunctional family situations with his bandmates, even though two of the guys in the band, he started the band with them, but they're like over. It's kind of like when you have that person in your family that has just fucked up one too many times, and it's hard to forgive them. You love them, but it's hard to forgive them and forget that this all happened. So the nice part about him connecting with Call is this very overprotective person. He immediately comes to Ryan's aid when his band members are messing with him. And Ryan has been to prison, and he's kind of used to sticking up for himself. So he's not really sure what to think about this big blonde guy with the protective forehead crinkle. I think I'm going to trademark that. It's actually, I found the picture, the cover image has a guy who has the protective forehead crinkle, and it was so fun to write about that and then find the picture. But Call, he was no angel before. And what I had fun with is I dove into the rabbit hole of research trying to give him a background as a calliope player. And I discovered that there was a man in Iowa, all these Iowa connections. I went to college in Iowa. I lived there for 4 years. I didn't know anything about this. If you've ever heard of Norman Baker, who is famous in Iowa for many things, he was a vaudeville performer. He owned a radio station in Muscatine that got him into some trouble with the government. And then he decided, well, in the middle of all that, he had a mail order business for art supplies, but he also patented a portable calliope called a calliophone. It's a smaller, not as loud, easier to maintain, and works on compressed air instead of steam. So I'm like finding out all this stuff. And then I discovered that Norman Baker started a cancer clinic because he was determined that he had the cure to cancer, and had all these people coming to him for this cure for cancer. So Norman Baker is Call's uncle, and Call worked for his uncle because it was the Depression, and his family had to send him away to work because they couldn't feed him anymore. And he was actually the one that invented the calliophone, not his uncle. I'm a little alternate history here if you're into that sort of thing. But the wildest part is I found a book someone had written about Norman Baker, and it is a guy that I went to college with. His father was my history professor. He is currently a professor of history in Kansas. And I was like, this is just like, this was meant to happen, right? I was meant to discover this little wild story. So what you find out about Call is that he was actually, his uncle delivered him to the carnival after a very traumatic experience. And that's how he ended up at the carnival, and why it's been 80 plus years in our time, but it's only been a year for him. So they have there's a lot of hijinks, tour bus hijinks. There's a lot of traveling. They start out in Nashville, and the books follow the real Warped Tour from that year. And so they go to Virginia, and then they come back and they go to Pennsylvania and Ohio. And so there's like all these stops happen in the book, and different things occur. And yeah, that's our boys. So you have your kind of jaded, troubled rock star and our overly protective man out of time.
I think it's so awesome that you're doing the 2018 Warp Tour. So I took my kid to that when it was in Shakopee, Minnesota.
Awesome.
Absolutely amazing show.
Yeah, I went for several years with my kid, but I didn't get to go to that year because we were out of the country when it came towards us. But I did go to the 2019. They did like two-day festivals as like the 25th anniversary of Warp Tour. So I did get to go to that and talk to a bunch of people. And yeah, I'm sad that it's gone, because what a great experience.
It really was.
Mm-hmm.
So Russ,
Yes,
let's dive a little bit deeper into the fourth book, as well as
all right,
a little bit deeper into their relationship and who else we're going to be hanging out with in this one.
Sure. So Blunt Force Rising. That's this guy right here. And if you can see here on the cover here, so you have sort of this android face here and the kind of blood dripping down from the eyes into that's your cruise ship here. So the setup is that there's a robotics and AI and cybernetics conference, just an industry trade show, but it's on this cruise ship, right? Your usual, shenanigans. And it's supposed to be set up where you'll have your usual stuff, right? Oh, we'll do some panels, we'll have some breakout sessions, we'll have a guest speaker and blah, blah, blah. And then you have all the cocktail parties and whatever. But what happens is right away you realize, so this woman, Theresa Ranadine, she is the CEO of Ranadine. And what she does is she's the realm's sole creator of androids and the leader in AI. And she's the lead sponsor for the conference. And Hardwick and Whistler have been hired to do a little extra security. It's not the kind of thing that Hardwick usually does, but what had happened is that, as I was saying before, how Hardwick and Whistler are kind of butting heads a little bit about, like, he wants a seat at the table. And she had basically told him, look, you want to have more voice in how things go? Bring in some clients. That's how this business works. You want to have a bigger voice? Bring in revenue. Because I pay I pay your salary, I pay for everything. So, bring it. And so what does he do? He lands this gigantic client because his girlfriend works for the robotics company. His girlfriend is also an android. And what's happening is that in this realm, androids legally have rights. They are full-blooded citizens, but only for about 10 years. But it's kind of just on the books. You can make something technically legal, but that doesn't mean that people have to accept it. So there's a lot of friction there. And what I use is, in this case, I'm using androids as sort of as sort of metaphor, symbolic for any marginalized group that we're seeing around now. I mean, whether you consider it to be the trans community or others, but this sort of people who have this irrational hatred for a group. And if you ask them why, all they do is just start screaming and going crazy. They can't really tell you why they're pissed. They just, because they don't look like me, and that must mean they're the worst thing that ever happened. They're cause for all my problems. But of course, that's just nonsense. But so the androids are sort of a substitute for any marginalized community. And as soon as, even before we get into the ship, you're already seeing protesters outside, pro and con. Android lives matter, everyone matters. On the other hand, androids are an abomination, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So even before we start, there's already a lot of tension going on. And what my intent was from the beginning is that I wanted everyone who's on board to be very there's a lot of hostility simmering with everyone, and they kind of don't even really seem to know why. And what happens is that just by happenstance, Hardwick did not set this up. Two of her friends are on this cruise because one of her friends is a nurse, and she's just trying to get some extra professional credits so she can get a better job. And then her best friend is there to sort of tag along when they're sharing a room. And her friend, Dolores, who's this big burly woman. She's a baggage handler at the cruise ports, but she's also a private investor. She hates androids. I mean, she hates them. And so Nini, that's the nurse, and Hardwick, they're like, what's your problem? But just kind of how it is. So already there's a lot of personal stakes going on. And so they're on the ship, and a conference is going on. And in the very first panel, they're just the pro and the anti-android crowd. They're just starting to scream. They're not even like talking about the topic of the panel. They just start yelling at each other. And what's happening is that we learn that androids are kind of disappearing from the streets, and the cops don't care. Nobody seems to care. And the androids there are like, you're saying that your typical panels where these experts talk about, these very lofty ideas about, social change and the way things are supposed to be. But when real issues come about, they're like, let's just talk about the nice things, but that doesn't really work. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And then along the way, a murder takes place on the ship, and I won't say why or how. And it really starts to sort of like really ramp up the tension, and Hardwick gets sucked in right into the middle of this. And now there's a lot of tension going on. And what we learn about, there's what's called a death code. And what's happened is that somehow, some way, there's rumors that androids are starting to literally break down because of this death code, and no one really knows exactly why. Is it programming? Is it sabotage? No one seems to understand it, and no one's really acknowledging that it's real. So you have a lot of these disparate elements all combustible in this enclosed space. I mean, they're supposed to be off realm in the far reaches of space, looking at nebulas and stars, but they're in a box. They're in a tube, in a chrome tube for 3 days. There's no going home. You can't say, well, I've had enough. That's tough. You are literally locked in a box for 3 days, millions and millions of miles away. There's no going home. And this murder takes place on board, and Hardwick and Whistler are trying to figure what's happening, while Hardwick and Whistler are at each other, are kind of beefing with each other. Then this murder takes place. Whistler's girlfriend's on board. She's an android. It's getting very tense. And then a thing happens. And when that thing happens, I can say kind of all hell breaks loose pretty significantly. And in this particular novel, it was my kind of stab at sci-fi horror. I am not a traditional horror author per se, as a friend of mine likes to say. You're not a horror author. You're an author who writes a little bit of horror. So I sort of preface it at that. But I could say, bar none of the 4 novels, not even close, this is the bloodiest, most violent of the 4 novels. I mean, by like a long shot.
So you've been warned.
Certainly the bloodiest. Maybe, I don't know about the most, no, maybe the most violent, but definitely the bloodiest. I won't really say why. I don't want to say why or what's really happening there. But as they're involved in all this kind of mayhem, they kind of still have to figure out, A, what the hell is going on, and B, as this mayhem is going on, the actual ship itself ain't working right. And they're cut off from everybody. So they are literally trapped in a death box way, millions and millions of miles away, and nobody's coming to help. And that's kind of the thrust of really what's going on there. And while all this chaos is happening, the characters are really kind of getting into real issues, within themselves, about society, about, do androids matter? Do they deserve to actually have rights? And there are some legitimate concerns. I mean, if you're an organic, a human, and you're seeing androids who walk around who have they're computerized. I mean, who's to say that they couldn't suddenly start tapping into mainframes and start hacking your healthcare systems and your bank records? I mean, there are safeguards involved so that can't happen. But it's not unreasonable to think, but what if? Because you just don't know. So people are nervous. And then there's a lot of people. So I want to present sort of, I don't want to say, your classic, it's both sides. But the fact is, very few issues are black and white. There's gradations there, right? All right, at least can we have a conversation about things? Because today, in today's society, you can't have conversations with anyone about anything. It's either you believe a thing or you believe the other thing. Well, how about we sort of, you tell me what you think and I tell you what I think, and we sort of work, see if we can figure it out. Well, that doesn't happen a lot. And you see that here, but I try to get into the stuff while they're dealing with the stuff. So there's a lot of tension going on. And what I had done is I knew I wanted to write this kind of a novel about 2 novels ago, because I knew that I wanted to sort of, like I said earlier, where in the first couple and 3 novels, there's a lot of room to run, right? She's that classic. She walks the streets, she's going down dark alleys and taking long walks and has that inner monologue. And because I'm just sort of myself, if you can actually see over this show, you see all those books up on the shelf. A lot of them, they're books. I read a lot of philosophy, a lot of mythology, spirituality, psychology. So that's just kind of the way I'm wired that way. And in all of my novels, I like to bring a philosophical bent to everything that I write, because it's just who I am. It's my own sense of how I explore. I like the big questions, why are we here? What does it mean? But there's folds within that. And I want the characters to kind of go through that too. So while they're in the middle of all this chaos, as opposed to having all this room to run and going from city block to block, neighborhood to neighborhood, where I've done in the other novels, this is all off realm, everything. Nothing, there's nothing street level in this book, which is unlike every other book in the series. I wanted everyone to be very compressed and claustrophobic and on top of each other. And it's sort of, like in your own way, it's sort of like Die Hard, right? After a while, he keeps circling back to the same spots. It's the same kind of thing, because when you're in a closed space, there's only so many places you can physically go, right? So it's if you've ever been on a cruise ship, right? The mechanicals are at the bottom, and then the higher up you go, you have your guest rooms, and then you've got your, the bars and the restaurants and the spas and whatnot, and all that stuff's on there. But if you're physically trapped and there's danger everywhere, every physical step that you take matters. Every door that you enter matters. Every corner matters. And that's really unlike what I've done in the past. So I really wanted to challenge myself. And what was sort of for me amusing is that initially I wanted to do more of like an Agatha Christie, and then there were none, right? But you know what? God, that's really hard. Really hard. Very early on, I said, I can't do that. I'm not up for this. So I kind of but I did stick with the locked room mystery. And again, it was challenging, because when you physically can't just say, I'm out of here, it forces you to sort of like really be kind of how do you be active and compressed at the same time? It's very tense. And writing it was very tense for me, because I had to really kind of figure out every motion, right? Every step, every leg. If I'm on this side of the ship, but I need to get to the other side of the ship and there's danger, how do I do it? I mean, it's 50 feet. All I have to do is go 50 feet. But what if 50 feet ain't 50 feet, right? If there's danger at every turn.
Or a wall.
Right. Right. I mean, there's only so many ways to physically go up, right? Do you really want to be in an elevator when chaos is happening? I don't know. It sounds like a death trap to me, which means you take stairs. Well, how many staircases actually exist on a cruise ship? Not that many.
As many as you want them to be.
Or which were not many, right? So there's a lot of this claustrophobia and a lot of danger, and with the mystery involved. And then I knew when this was over that the net result of this book was going to lead to the 5th one, which is I'm writing it right now. I'm into part 2 now. So the ramification, so the book 5 takes place about a year after the end of this one. But all I can say is that Hardwick and Whistler will never.
No spoilers, man. No spoilers.
No, I'll just say they'll just never be the same. That's all. That's all that I'll say. There's a lot, so they're impacted significantly. How you'll have to read to find out. But I can tell you that of all the very dangerous cases that Hardwick and Whistler have taken on before, and they've all affected them, but nothing like this one.
Which means you've got a love for book 5.
Yeah. What'd you say?
I said, you really have to level up for book 5.
Yeah.
This one, I see. What I've done is my intent long term is I see the first 5 books as kind of like series 1, and then I have already kind of thematically, I have the next 5 kind of mapped out.
Marvel Universe. You're in phase 1. You're in phase 2.
I kind of just know where, just thematically, where I want each one to go and how they evolve. But they're all, again, every novel by itself is a standalone mystery, but there's places I want to take the characters, and I have a sense of where that was. So I started mapping out this idea, this at least 10 books, several books ago. So I kind of know ultimately where I want to get to, even though the details, I don't know. I'm still working on them.
So, Ro, I'm going to start with you on this one because I know you got to go here in a moment. But here's one of the fun things. I mean, and Russ was kind of hitting on a lot of the stuff I want to hit on with this one. The fun part of being a writer is we get to go down a lot of rabbit holes. We get to do a lot of stuff. But I'm going to throw out the evil question in this one just because I can. Somebody left me in charge. As a writer, from a creative process, what'd you learn working on this book?
Oh, I think there were a couple of points in the story where, this was my first time really. I've written horror before with a little romance. I've written paranormal. This was definitely my first time with a time differential. And it's kind of funny because I have another series that has a sort of a vampire, and we find out much later that he's actually, not 25, he's in his 70s when things are happening. But this is different because this guy lived a year of his life and now it's 80 years later. Like, it's not like he experienced all this time in between. So putting somebody into a new situation like that and thinking about, he's not going to know what an electric guitar sounds like. He's not going to know what, he's going to understand an organ because of, he's going to understand what these instruments are, but like, how do we, and it, because it's sort of magical, you get to play with, oh, well, he was sent out into the world with everything he needed in order to survive. So then I got to play with that magic, and that was fun. But there were a couple of flashbacks in writing their backstories that were so sad. Like, I don't know if you've ever written something and then you kind of push the computer away and go, oh, I'm sorry, how could I have done that? Like, that is so awful. And
that's when I cackle.
Yeah, well, there's like the mean things that make you cackle, like, ha ha ha, they deserve that. In fact, everybody leaves this book hoping and wishing very, very bad things on Ryan's band members. So I had a conversation. One of the other books in the series is called Go for the Company by Anders C. Lark. And it is basically this guy ends up in hell, but it's actually like corporate America. And
that sounds right. No,
Stan is the CEO. They misspelled his name. It's really Stan. It's not, they added the A. So I was talking to Ander last night and I was like, well, everybody is saying, and we're going to write another set of books, and everybody's saying that these band members really need to have something bad happen. So I don't know, there may be a collaboration there, but no, I think that's the biggest thing for me. Besides the research part, which was really fun. The other surprise is I ended up listening to a bunch of late 70s, early 80s, like America and Ambrosia And
don't you dare be insulting those bands.
I'm not insulting.
Face, Missy.
No, not insulting. I love that music, but I am a metalhead, and this was very interesting that this story took me in that. They took me in that direction.
Insult the Eagles, and we shall never insult the Eagles, and we shall never.
I would never. I would never. Although seriously,
no. Watch yourself. Check yourself.
When hell freezes over,
Children.
That makes me laugh every time.
The greatest title.
All of these bands that say we'll never tour again, and then they come back. Like, just don't even say it in the first place. Anyway, no, I found myself listening, and it's funny because if you look at I just got my recap from YouTube Music that shows me what I've been listening to while I was writing this book, and I'm like, oh yeah, normally it's Slipknot, Metallica, and I have Toto and Ambrosia and oh gosh. Well, I also did a dive into music that had carnival music in it, to get into that vibe. Listening to Tom Waits, he has some really weird stuff with carnival stuff. Oh gosh, I can't even think. Anyway, it was a lot of music that I loved from growing up, but I haven't listened to in forever. So now it's my playlists have really changed. So I'm going to run, and I'm so sorry. I have tech class right now.
Have fun.
Thank you guys for having me. You can find me at rlmerrillauthor.com. You Can Do Magic comes out on September 27th. And thank you guys.
Thanks, bro. We'll see you soon.
I'll be reading that, by the way. I will be reading that whole series. I know a couple of the other authors in it too. I've been looking forward to that one.
We need to chat anyway.
Yes.
Bye.
All right. So, Russ.
Yes, buddy.
What did you learn when you were working on this one? Especially since you talked about the love of philosophy and study and all of the rest of that. That's what we managed to find out things about ourselves when we're working on some of these books where it's where the hell did that come from out of the depths and recesses of my sick mind?
Philosophically, the books are this book is still kind of very in line with the way I've written kind of the other ones. But the real challenge for myself, there was two. One was, do I think I can pull off what my version of sci-fi horror? And what happened is that actually I had my inner circle of readers. They actually told me, dude, this is too bloody. You gotta scale this back. It's too much. Because that was my own sort of, inexperience. And I very clearly could see it now where, making something gory doesn't make it scary. Right. And there's a very big distinction there. And so I realized that sometimes less is more in this particular case, but really the sense of, could I do, I've done a few locked room murder mysteries in short form, but can I do it for 90,000 words? I didn't know. I mean, it was a real test. And, I don't know about you guys, but when it comes, I don't like to fail. I don't like to fail, and I don't like to live in fear. So I really kind of just dove in and kind of white knuckled my way through it. And I had to sort of decide, how do I make this, sustainable? It's funny because some early reviews were sort of like, well, the first couple of chapters were a little slow. I'm like, a little slow. I mean, what do you want? A 90,000 word, bloodbath is not something I'm interested in. You got to sort of let yourself kind of we got to find our way into the story, and we'll find our way into the world. But I felt myself as I was writing it, I felt the tension in myself building. And the question was, what's the right balance of, because I'm a big believer in, reveal and conceal, and you keep doing this throughout. And by the end, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. But the question is how much is the right amount of tension before you let it out? There's no one formula for it. And I had to sort of test myself and challenge myself with, How much do you sort of let it bubble? When do you let it burst? And then when do you take a deep breath? Just to I just got to regroup for a minute, because not just as the characters have to regroup for a second, but the readers too. Even they just all right, you put me through a roller coaster. Let me get off this one for a second. Let me puke. Let me chuck down another slushie and a new hot dog to recharge and then go back at it. Where are those right moments? And when you are recharging, what's happening during those recharge moments? Right? Is it just, and there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of a little side humor just to let the tension out. But do you want to use it for that? Or do you want to say, this is kind of when, when madness is happening, we can't necessarily get into too much of the stuff. So what's the right balance? And it was a real challenge for me to see if I could do that and really kind of build and build and build, because I knew that Act 3 had to really build to something significant that was unlike what happens in part 3. I didn't want it to be a carbon copy of part 2. So I knew what I was building toward, and it was part 3 is not what part 2 looks like, but that was intentional. But the question was, could I really pull it off in the ways that I think are really going to pay off? And I was unclear about that, because this was not my typical mystery. And I think it went well. I'm happy. I mean, the early buzz has been very, very positive, very encouraging. I've gotten some just throughout the series. I mean, I've gotten some, I have to say, I'm extremely grateful, because I'm a big believer in, when you ask someone, no one owes it to me to read my book ever. Nobody owes it to me to buy it. Nobody owes it to me to read it, and nobody owes it to me to say something nice about it. It's not owed, it's earned. And when you get Nicholas Meyer, writer director, Star Trek II Wrath of Khan, has given me heavy endorsements for this series. I've got Reed Farrell Coleman, he's like the godfather of crime fiction, another one. I've gotten New York Times bestselling authors who are saying really wonderful things about the series. Lee Murray, who's won the Stoker Award 84,000 times, gave me this wonderful, wonderful endorsement for this. This is what she said about what'd she say about this one? Oh, no, it's not on the back of this one. She gave me this incredible endorsement for the book, and it was really heartening. So it just gives me more confidence that, if people who I admire are buying what I'm selling, that I feel good about it as I go forward. But you just don't know. You sit there, it takes me about a year all in, from first clackety key until it's a physical book. You don't know. You don't know what you have. You have to hope that you're doing your best. And especially when you come out of your comfort zone, it's a risk, right? But for me, it's sort of, because it's an ongoing series, there's this odd mix of, if you watch there's been 25, 30 James Bond movies. A James Bond movie is a James Bond movie, but they're different. Your mileage you like some better than others, but some of them in Monte Carlo or in Venice or Spain. They're not all in the center of London, right? You have to go to other places. But what I want to do is, I don't like to do in a series sort of where each book is just kind of a carbon copy of the last one. And look, if you can write a formulaic series and be a bestseller, God bless you. God bless you forever. But for me as an author, I get bored if I don't constantly push myself to do new things. So every book in its own way has a similar feel, but it's a very different animal. But this one was I really wanted to step out of my comfort zone and see if I could pull it off. I think it went well. Ultimately, the readers decide, whether they agree. But I was pleased with it, and I'm glad that I stepped out of that comfort zone and really challenged myself in a different way, because it really reinvigorated me, and it really kind of set the stage for what's coming next as well. So I'm glad that I took the risks, and we'll see what the folks think. We'll see what the public thinks. They'll ultimately, they get to choose.
So Layla, how about you? Especially since you're working through the timeline crunch, but what have you kind of learned about yourself and your process and just the act of creation?
I am so glad that I have an entire notebook of rocker characters and scenarios, because I've done rewrites before, but I've never taken a whole novel, chucked it to the side and been like, all right, we got a month where, we're going to do this. So I was glad I kind of had all the background and everything that I needed for the characters and had done all the legwork. Because this is really like, I think this is like my 8th rocker book. So, and I've probably got 15 that I haven't even worked on that are just, notes thrown in a notebook. So that for me just kind of was like, okay, continuing to do the notebooks like I've been doing. And like my writing instructor way back in the day used to say, collecting underpants, because them underpants are saving me right now. I'd be in a lot of trouble without all those underpants. But it's funny that you asked about learning, because right before this panel, I was actually on a video call with a friend of mine who does a lot of gig work, and he's a rigger, and he does a lot of stage setup. And I really needed, I had this thought, I was up till 3 a.m. brainstorming last night. And I know there's a saboteur that is the cause of the original pyro accident, and they're going to strike again. But I kind of needed somebody who was up to date on a modern stage to help me with the technical, like, how am I going to rig this to pull off what I want to happen? So we had like a 45-minute conversation. I've got like 3 or 4 different ideas to play with now to figure out, like, when my saboteur hits, what's his method going to be? So that was a big one, was just kind of, going to, I can research all I want and I can draw on memories, but they're like 25 years old. So going to somebody who, was just rigging on a stage a weekend ago and being like, okay, I need this to happen. How do I technically make this work with today's, with what the setup is for today? So he kind of walked me through some things, which was awesome, because I was like, oh man, yeah, I was approaching that from an old school angle and not, a modern one. So I needed to like go through and tweak that. And the other big thing that I really felt like I got out of the process, I started writing that first Rocktoberfest book right after I finished the last one. And I knew what I wanted to do with it. I arced it out. I've got it set aside. But what I really learned about the process is sometimes you just have to like write out a whole bunch of things you might never use before you get to that, like that nice creamy center at the middle of the Cadbury egg. And
Totally right.
yeah, I really, like, last week I'd been fiddling with the 97K. I'd had an alpha read a look at it. And when your alpha tells you the same thing that you've been concerned about for a good, like, 45K of that 90K, it's really time to make a change. So I had like yanked 16K out, and I was trying to do some additions and remodels. And I'm looking at this thing going, why am I fighting with this? It's not going to get where I want it to be in time for Rocktoberfest. It's time to like hit the brakes, stick it aside, and like just go for it and do. Usually I go for the angst. Like, a lot of my books are very angsty, and you have a lot of internal drama. And this one has been so much fun, like hilarity right from the beginning. I just decided, like, I'm going to just go with whatever these guys give me, no matter how insane it's going to be. So we've got prickly pear pancakes. We've got, the pickle challenge. We got things coming up in this that, like, it's so far away from my other 2 Rocktoberfest books, and yet I'm having just as much fun with this one as I did with the last 2. And I'm loving these characters so much, and I'm loving. So the St. Bernards were the only thing I kept from the 97K. I've lived in this house for 17 years, And I have some new neighbors next door, and they have the most amazing St. Bernards. And those St. Bernards have kind of been the inspiration for, I've got to have these dogs. Got to have these dogs in the story. They've got to be a central part of this story. And I'm like, oh, and they're going to be a foil for this singer, because otherwise he's got that arrogance. He's got that cockiness, kind of, like Ro was saying, he's a little bit of a man whore. And, I've got to bring him down somehow. So having him, running from these dogs on more than one occasion and hiding from these dogs, and literally like it's going to be the Pink Panther when he's going around the house, because he's going to be like peering around corners and everything, just waiting for these dogs to appear. That's really going to be one of the fun elements. I've really written a lot of poly stuff, so this is a poly book, so we're kind of going there with the poly again. But I've just kind of learned to have as much fun as possible, even with a deadline that like I should be freaking out about. But I put it into context the other night when I was sitting here doing shots before a writing session, and I'm like, look, I'm talking to my dog. She's my writing companion. She's in the chair next to me. My first Wolf Shifter book, Waiting for Rain, was written in 15 days. That was 94K, 15 days, hardly any sleep. If I can write that one in 15 days, hitting my 60K mark, and I've still got like 3 weeks, I'm golden. I'm right at the center of the Cadbury egg, and this is going to be a blast.
Everybody's getting the hint behind what it's like to really be a writer.
The shots before writing, that's really very accurate. Yeah.
Oh man, I am set up over here. I've got a wine.
I'm right after you, girlfriend. As soon as this is over, Mama gets a glass of port. So
yes.
Yeah.
Right, drunk, at it sober.
See, the wine isn't. We make our own wine. It's one of the things I love about being out here in Iowa. I've got berries of multiple kinds that grow in my backyard. So there is probably about 70 some odd bottles of wine in the basement that we have made. All I do is I'll put one in the fridge and one on the shelf next to me, and we're just going to write, and whatever comes out on the page.
I believe it's legal for you to ship to me, Jim, and Russ. I'm just going to put that out there. I think it's legal.
All right. So, Jenny, it's up to you. What did you learn on this one?
I learned what a mosaic novel was. Let me tell you, that's an exciting new phrase you're going to hear me using a lot. That's probably my biggest learning. I'd already done a lot of the research, again, because when I started writing, it was all novels set in the Old West, which, were not this. And I hadn't actually planned to write dystopian because I tend to not enjoy it because I feel like it's so dire and so dour and nothing fun seems to ever happen. And these books, A.E. Stanton does not have a sense of humor that A.E. Stanton is aware of, just so we know.
Yeah, we know A.E. Stanton has no sense of humor. We're aware.
Yeah, well, no, it's really important because it's Gini Koch, my stuff's funny. So please don't pick this up and think it's a laugh riot. There is a lot of gallows humor. But there's also hope. And that, to me, is the most important thing that I think a lot of dystopian avoids. Hope. It's just all desolate. And maybe you survive, but it's probably not worth it. I don't enjoy that. I want characters to have hope. So that's definitely in there. I had to do a lot of research about Betelgeuse going nova, making sure that it's like we learn something new in science that changes what we know about science every day. So right now, pundits saying, oh, it's not a risk at all, is really simple for me to extrapolate and go, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm not paying attention. Or you don't have the scope that will be invented somewhere between now and when my brilliant scientist Melissa creates it. Okay, she's building off of stuff that's been built that she's holding on to from the olden days. So I had to do a lot of I ended up doing a lot of astrophysics that goes into the Alien series and others that no one would read the books and go, there's no astrophysics in there. Oh yeah, there is. So much more than I wanted. Yeah, I'm really clear on what stars are nearby and not. So I had to do all that, but a lot of it was really trying to figure out what happens, like I was saying earlier, the reversion to, we will not allow ourselves to go any farther. They're back to steam. There are still paddle boats on the rivers because there were old ones being held around, right? And so now you can make a new one because there's still trees. There's still all the things we need. We haven't destroyed all that because everybody got locked. All the good, worthy people got locked into these domed cities. So they actually stopped. And most of all of this actually was written, I think, before the Great Pause. And during the pause, we went nowhere and all the animals went, is it safe? Ooh, it might be safe. Let me come out again, right? And that's exactly what's happened. There aren't enough people outside of the domes to have bothered nature. Nature has just taken over. If you've ever driven on a road that hasn't been maintained and you see all the weeds and stuff coming up, that's what happened to what the characters call the tar roads. They're terrible, but they're still there. The white roads are what were, you'll figure it out as you read, but they're monorails, okay, that were put in to connect the big cities to each other and to send the prisoners to their prisons. You have to have some way to do that, right? You shove them in the monorail cart, it goes to the prison, out and comes back. So the white roads are big and they're expansive and they're exits and all this other stuff, but they're also high up, which keeps you safe from mutants and such, but doesn't necessarily keep you safe from the gangs that we're writing. So I had to do that kind of research, but the nice thing about setting things in the far future is you can really do whatever the heck you want. So as long as the people are still doing things that people would do, be horrible to each other and terrible to each other and be money grubbing and all the other things. Human nature is not going to change. Yeah, it's probably 1,000 years or more in the future. We're still humanity. We still kind of suck, but there's still good people within, and that's who we're following. We're following some of the good ones, not some of the bad ones. So otherwise, I'm trying to think, because this series has been with me a really, really long time. So I've known these characters for forever. So I discovered new things about them before. I haven't discovered new things about them in this case, because this was the first 3 installments gathered together to create the Mosaic novel. So I know where they're going. My big question, honestly, this I don't know. I'm 50-50. Do they find a city or do they not? If they still do find the place, if Deacon is correct, and there really is a city where the light didn't go out, do they find it? If they find it, I know what happens. Okay. Or do they not? And I haven't made that decision yet. And it's the only decision in everything that's coming. Because I planned for probably 2 more mosaics to make a trilogy that will be their arc. I haven't decided yet. I honestly don't know. There's 2 choices, and within those choices, each choice has its own options of what I would
I'm
do.
going for a quarter right now, so we're going to answer that tonight. We're going to flip a coin.
Heads.
Oh, now I got to find the coin.
See, you weren't ready. And my cat's snoozing, but I'm not going to suggest we flip our cats because that only ends badly.
All right,
No.
so I have the quarter. I have the
That
quarter
is
here.
applause,
Here's
no
what
matter
we do.
what.
All right, you called heads.
Heads.
All right, I'll give you the answer off the air so we don't spoil the series.
Woohoo! Well, this here is Thor, and I think Thor has made an appearance in almost every video I've done. He is just the biggest lap kitty.
He's a gorgeous boy.
Oh, thank you.
Himself, the assassin, is asleep. And Russ, we saw your cat. What's your cat's name?
That's Callie.
Aw.
She's actually, let's see if I can get, she's chewing on a thing.
Yeah.
Well, while we start doing cats,
There you go.
so start wrapping it up.
I would do a cat, but my cat would do exactly what Callie is doing to Russ.
Oh.
With much more intent.
Yeah.
Not little love bites, but
Oh.
why did you wake me up? So he's happily snoozing. We're going to let him.
No biting, baby. All right.
Right? That's
All
what
right.
we're getting, only it wouldn't be nearly as nice as what Callie just did to Russ. Leave me alone.
So,
Well, Thor is an old boy. He is 16.
Aw.
He is here with his 2 litter mates. So he is one of my senior babies, and so he doesn't bite and nip anymore. He just kind of loves up on you and wants to be held
Aw.
all the time, right, Thor? All the time.
well, we'll let you guys go back to being cat caretakers. I have a Tweenie that's probably being unhappy with me by now. But before we do that, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. So, Russ, websites, social media, and of course, remind everybody the books they need to come grab for that to be read pile.
Sure. So you can find me online at russcolchamiro.com. All my stuff is available on Amazon. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, author Dude Russ. And then I'm on Blue Sky, which is author Dude Russ at bsky.social. And also check out, for those of you who don't know, I also host my own podcast, Russ's Rock and Roller Coaster. I know Ginny's been on the show a couple of times. New season starts, well, tomorrow, but for you guys, it'll be in 2 weeks. It's Wednesday nights at 8:00. You can sign up and watch them live. And if you can't see them, I post all my episodes on YouTube. There's about, 95 or so. I'm actually going to be hitting my 100th episode this season, so look out for a special one. It's all free to check out. And the latest book, Blunt Force Rising from Crazy 8 Press, and then the other books in the series, just as a reminder, and I'll let you go. Crackle and Fire is book 1. Fractured Lives is book 2. And Hot Ash is book 3. And that's what I got.
Layla?
Well, you can find me, Thor, and the rest of the menagerie on Facebook. I'm on Wix. I've got a newsletter. I am learning to be all over Instagram and TikTok. And the current book coming out is going to be Damaged Saints. But please check out the whole Road to Rocktoberfest. There are some amazing books in it. And if you are a huge Rocker Boys fan like I am, go back to the last 2 sets. We've got, another 24, 25 books out there that is all Road to Rocktoberfest. My other 2 with that are Tattered Angel and Bleeding Dawn. So I had to have my angels and my saints in there. I got to get my demon in there next time somehow. I'm not sure how I'm going to manage that one yet, but yeah, come find the Rocktoberfest. We start going live at the start of October, and we look forward to having all new readers.
Jenny?
GiniKoch.com. I'm all over Facebook. You can sign up for my newsletter, which is free, off of my Facebook fan page, Hairspray and Rock and Roll. I'm also on Pinterest. I'm on X Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. It looks like I'm on Instagram, but I'm really not. And The Dawning of the New West by A.E. Stanton releases from Ginger Blue Publishing on September 26th. So I think it'll be out when this airs.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, speculative-fiction-academy.com, creatingprose.com, of course, here at ConTinual. And the second edition of Business Essentials for Writers just dropped, which has a whole lot of stuff on the generative AI. And of course, Fairy Films is still rocking and rolling itself. So until next time, go stack up those to be read piles, and we'll see you again soon.